All right, thank you for staying with us. The conversation right now is about democracy, the struggle, for democracy and how we got to this point and matters arising. When we talk about democracy, especially before this Fourth Republic, during the military days, many issues has happened, many waters, as they say, has passed under the bridge. You remember the acclaimed winner of the 1993 election, the late Moshood Kashima Abiola, popularly known as MK Abiola. Of course, he wanted to be president of Nigeria, and of course, he was fielded. He carried the banner of the Social Democratic Party then with the Hope 93 message. His challenger at the time is that of the NRC, National Republican Convention. Bashir Tofa, quite a keen contest it was, and that election has been adjudged to be maybe till this time the fairest and of all the elections we've had, even till now in Nigeria. So during that struggle, you know what happened? The annulment of the election in 1993 and the struggle that followed, one of those persons that stood firm with MK Abiola at the time was one of his wives, Alhaja Kudirat. You have his picture or the video on the screen right now. She was that ferocious, fierce, possibly the biggest family member in terms of support that you will see publicly acclaimed of the woman Kudirat Abiola. So fierce. So when the man was going through all the struggles, the woman was there, attending to issues, having meetings, speaking up where necessary. And, during the junta led by the late Sani Abacha, the woman was killed on 4th of June, 1996. 4th of June, 1996. And of course, he died in her car from machine gun fire. And of course, her driver also was killed. Her personal assistant, who was later accused of being involved with assassins, was in the car, but was not killed as one Shofolao. Now, after that time, democracy was returned, and Abiola died, and all of those things in detention. And one name got up. You remember Sergeant Michelia Jabila, popularly called Sergeant Rogers. Of course, many persons remember now. And of course, the closest man in terms of defense to the late head of state then, that was General Abacha, was this man in question, talking about the man that has just been in a kind of way freed, called Colonel Al-Mustapha. That was his name, quite a popular figure. And of course, yesterday there is another dimension, because a case was instituted by Lagos State government against many persons, including Sergeant Mustapha at the time, or Colonel Mustapha at the time. But yesterday, the Supreme Court dismissed the case. Finally, of course, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter in cases in jurisprudence in Nigeria. It's a court of policy as well. Dismissed the case against Al-Mustapha, and it has gotten many persons talking to say, is that the end? Would there be no justice? Oh, by the way, when the court has spoken, that means justice. But if the justice that we've seen at the court, if this is what it is, how about really in life? Has justice really been served? Because the woman was murdered right there in Lagos during the nationwide protest that threw the annulment of her husband's presidential poll victory. Now, Major Al-Mustapha, not a colonel, Major Al-Mustapha retired, who was the CSO to the late military head of state, General Sani Abacha, was fingered in her death and was subsequently charged to court by the Lagos State government alongside the son of the late military dictator Muhammad Abacha and one Lateef Shofolao that I said earlier. The High Court of Lagos State, in judgment that was delivered on January 30, 2012 by Justice Moji Dada, found the defendants guilty and sentenced them to death by hanging. However, a three-member panel of the Court of Appeal in a unanimous decision on July 12, 2013 voided the High Court judgment. And of course, the Appellate Court equally discharged and acquitted the defendant on the premise that the prosecution failed to adduce sufficient evidence to warrant the conviction and dealt penalty. Now, I'm trying to lay this background so that we know how we got here. Dissatisfied with the judgment of the Lagos State, the Lagos State approached the Supreme Court with the final arbiter on the matter, and the state sought to reinstate the High Court verdict that sentenced the appellant to death by hanging. The Supreme Court, in a ruling delivered in 2014, granted Lagos State the permission to reopen the case through an appeal, even though the time allowed by its rules had elapsed. While the case was slated on Thursday for the state to argue its appeal, it failed to send any legal representative to the court. The Apex Court also noted that the state failed to file any process since 2014 when it secured an order to reopen the matter. And of course, the long and short of the matter is that the case was dismissed because the Lagos State government and their council were dormant on the case. So you can safely say, based on technicalities, we have with us a public affairs analyst, and of course a journalist or a veteran journalist of repute, and a lawyer who possibly was very active during the struggle. Here with us, Barrister Dapo Ogunwusi joins us virtually. Barrister, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. I had to lay such background so that we can move very fast on the program. What do you make of this decision of law that the appeal court, and they have adduced their reason to, what you could call negligence on or docility on behalf of the case that has to do with the Lagos State government against Major Al-Mustapha, and it has been dismissed finally, based on technicality. Justice, as they say, is both sides. Will you say justice has been served on this matter? At least, Lord, I've spoken. Barrister Ogunwusi, go ahead.
Well, it is easy to conclude in a situation like this that what the ordinary man on the streets will regard as justice has not been served. But look at how the processes were filched to the point of to a situation whereby they arrived at that kind of conclusion. Because processes are important. As at 2012, there was a murder conviction.
Yeah.
2014, the appellate court overturned that conviction on the basis of insufficiency of evidence. Then there was an appeal. As a result of that appeal, the Supreme Court allowed the prosecution to bring the charges again, with the new evidence they said they had, or probably with more evidence with more evidence compared with whatever they submitted at the High Court. And the trial definitely will be on appeal. It's not going to go back to the High Court. And it was then left to the appellant, which is the Lagos State government or the Lagos State Prosecution Service, to go ahead and canvass the new evidence or the further or better evidence that it had, yes, to prosecute the case. And that is how it ran technically. Now, they slept on that duty. They didn't bring forward anything. They didn't file anything. They didn't proceed with the case. So you could see very clearly that this was the hand of politics. It was a political decision, and it was done in a very ugly and irresponsible manner. But I'm not talking about condemnations now. I'm interested in the impact on the rule of law itself. It is clear that if you kill in Nigeria, that is just the end of the road for you. Because the possibility of recompense, the possibility of, especially if it's a political matter, the possibility of somebody revisiting the case appropriately will be very, very low. Kudirat Abiola was killed in broad daylight on a street of Lagos State. So it was a matter for the Lagos State Prosecution Service. That is clear. it was also their duty to bring up the matter before the court, which they did up to 2020, up to 2012. After that, things developed K-leg. The Court of Appeal said, no, there wasn't enough evidence. And I asked myself, even at that time, because I was then, I had become very conscious of the problem. I asked myself, even then, that, look, what kind of evidence would the Court of Appeal prefer? There was a confessional statement from Sergeant Rogers. There were all kinds of things that were adduced. Even then, there is still the component of what you call circumstantial evidence. Because since Abacha stopped, since Abacha left power, no housewife was killed on the streets of Lagos anymore. I mean, that is just probably a little obtuse. But the problem we have is that it is difficult and it is extremely pathetic. And it gives us all, those of us who are still alive, an inkling as to the possibilities in a country like Nigeria.
All right.
All right, sir. I'd like to ask you, in Senate claims, would an 11-year break or delay have constituted or have resulted to the termination of the case, such as, I mean, a case of this magnitude, and is Nigeria an outlier here?
First of all, it is the duty of the prosecution to bring evidence before the court. It is not the duty of the court. And the court functions on date.
All right. It seems you're having some difficulty.
Give them so date to come and appear and do XYZ in court.
All right. We'll try and reconnect. If you can hear us, Dapo Ogunwusi, kindly reconnect so that we can have a smooth conversation, because there are many angles to this particular development, especially for me. Well, justice, as they say, it can be an ASS. I don't have to pronounce that. So it is just what it is. Due diligence appear to be missing here in this particular case, but he has put a very dynamic angle. So you can't take away politics from this matter. Dapo Ogunwusi, can you hear us now?
I hear you very clearly.
Please go ahead. You are going to land on your thought.
Yes. Now we come to the political considerations that could midwife this kind of gross abuse of the portals of justice. Because that is just the hope of the only hope, or the last hope of the common man. What is so hard in going back to the Supreme Court with evidence, the evidence you said you had in 2014? I don't understand how somebody could do that and still avoid the imputation of dishonesty or complicity. And if you look at political trends after then, you still ask yourself whether Abiola has actually got any kind of justice in Nigeria. Look at things very closely. They just use his name for politics once in a while. I think there was a time they gave him national honor. I don't even know the profile of the present government, because it is so clear that Tinubu himself was not particularly free of suspicion of some underhand complicity in some of those events. So you just ask yourself whether these allegations are not, sustained by the events that, that were associated with those incidents. Because it's very difficult for somebody to think through that and think that these are honest people.
Dapo Ogunwusi,
very difficult.
Are you talking about when you're talking about, you have put a dimension to it now, and it's quite, we're talking about a very serious matter here, because you said maybe there are rumors about the current president actually his involvement in all of those matter, and I like us to do that factually. Number two is the fact that, are you saying politics or underhand current, as far as politics is concerned, is involved in the docility of the Lagos state government who filed the case to have abandoned it? Because this is what happened yesterday, sir. The Supreme Court, in a ruling delivered in 2014, granted Lagos State the permission to reopen the case through an appeal. Even though the time allowed by its rules had elapsed, they still granted Lagos State the opportunity. Now, while the case was slated on Thursday for the state to argue its appeal, it failed to send any legal representative to the court. The Apex Court also noted that the state failed to file any process since 2014, when it secured an order to reopen the matter. Now, counsel to Hamza Al-Mustapha, Mr. Paul Daudu SAN, after the case was called, informed the Apex Court panel that Lagos State did not take any step to implement the order that was granted to reopen the trial. He argued that the state failed to demonstrate any seriousness in the matter. And he told the Apex Court that the ultimatum was not obeyed, as Lagos State failed to formally lodge an appeal to challenge its client's accuser. Now, following an inquiry by a 5-man panel of the Supreme Court led by Uwani Abaji, it was found that a hearing notice was duly served on Lagos State, which was not represented by any lawyer. Consequently, in a brief ruling, the Justice Abaji panel agreed that the state has lost interest in the matter. The panel held that 9 years was long enough for the appellant to have filed his notice of appeal and the appeal in the matter. Besides, the panel noted that there was no correspondence from the state to explain why it was not represented. Therefore, the case marked LC/CR 45/2014 was dismissed. Are you saying the Lagos State is intentionally complicit in this matter, and they have done it intentionally not to continue with this case? Is that what you're saying categorically?
Yeah, I will draw you back briefly in history. The governor of Lagos State, as at the time of that incident, later became governor of Osun State, General Oyinlola. He said something that Tinubu had resumed as his deputy governor before Abacha changed his mind as to his appointment. Nobody has ever denied that. You see, I don't like all of these dark things. People just call them conspiracy theories. Yet they are not debunked, and they are so factual and logical. I think the action of the Lagos State government is deliberate complicity. It's not accidental. I mean, you can't tell me that you told the court you had evidence, because it's only on the basis of that that the Supreme Court could have granted that appeal. Appeal is not granted to the prosecutor as a matter of right. Maybe you are not aware of that. If you are a prosecutor and you go on appeal, you have to show that as a matter of point of law, there is a reason why the court should allow you to make that appeal. In this case, they showed that the court complained about evidence. It's not as if the court did not find the guy guilty, but they said that there wasn't sufficient evidence. So we now have sufficient evidence to go ahead with the case and on appeal. And the Supreme Court opened the doors to them. And then they never went in that door. Not for 1 day, not for 1 week, not for 1 year. For 11 years. And you want to turn around, and they got notices. The Lagos State Prosecution Service got notices, just as the Supreme Court said in its own decision. So where do we go from here? It is their job. They didn't do it. Are you going to tell me it was an accident? If you tell me it was an accident, that is the only basis on which you could assume otherwise. And I want to assure you it was not an accident. They just decided within the system that there was no basis in pursuing that line of justice anymore. It had become unfashionable, politically incorrect and unfashionable for them to seek justice on behalf of MKO Abiola. And the outcome is what you just got.
All right, Barrister, I'd like to ask you, with the development of the cold feet and all of that, could the courts have compelled the Lagos state government to either, diligently prosecute that matter, or to have formally dismissed it, to have formally, stopped the prosecution if they wanted to, instead of allowing it to linger indefinitely?
No, it didn't linger indefinitely. You see, the court has its own pattern of slating cases. They have their own internal rules. How a case may be mentioned, how the appellant may come forward and adopt his brief, and the respondent will come forward and adopt his own brief. There are procedures for things like that in the court system. The court merely followed those procedures. The Lagos State Prosecution Service, the Lagos State Attorney General's office, was served notice that the court, was waiting for them. They did not even send a representation. They didn't bother. Look, I like people who are dishonest, but they are respectful to the victims. Why would they just throw the case in the bin like that? Why not even pretend? There was no pretense. They just threw it away. They couldn't be bothered by justice and their Ministry of Justice. Look, it is mind-boggling when you see all of these things in Nigeria and people refuse to rationalize. Look, I have to digress a little bit. If you go to court, you are either a claimant or a defendant, right? There could be a third party like an amicus or anything like that. But that was not a party to this. That would not be a party to the case. The other side, if it is criminal, there has to be a prosecutor and a defendant. The prosecutor is the person who has brought the allegation. The defendant is the person who wants to come forward to say, no, I'm not guilty, I didn't do these things. Now the prosecutor has the burden of proof to carry, to show the world how this person actually carried out the offense. The evidence that led to the conclusion that the court should be invited to make a decision in the matter. A situation like that puts all the burden on the prosecutor, which was the Lagos state government. The court will not make your case for you, or the court will not compel you to come and make your case. The court is just an arbiter. It is sitting on the fence. So, in this particular matter, the court has not done anything wrong or adverse to good order. A government will show that kind of disdain or become so derelict of its constitutional duty to citizens. I mean, I look at things like that and wonder, is that really a country? I mean, let's be realistic.
All right.
If they kill anybody today, the chances of that of justice coming as a result as an outcome of any kind of process are very low. And these are examples.
Yeah.
High wire politics.
Right. Now, it's been reported that, okay, for 11 years, this was abandoned. But we learned that while the Lagos State approached the court in 2014, to overturn the verdict, that's the Supreme Court, to overturn the verdict of the appellate court and restore that of the trial court, which found the defendant guilty, the appeal, as to Ogunwusi, and for the benefit of people watching us, was however abandoned till 2017, meaning after 2014. It took the Lagos State government 3 years to go back to the court, and when they came back, they sought and obtained permission of the Apex Court to extend the time for them to file necessary documents against the judgment of the Court of Appeal. And subsequently, the Supreme Court, in a ruling in December 2017, gave the appellant 30 days to file his notice of appeal and other necessary documents. Now, however, 9 years, that's where the 9 years, came in, after the leave was granted. Since 2017, the appellant failed to file any process at the Apex Court, and that was what was decided yesterday to say, slightly, the Lagos State government are no more interested in this matter. Two questions for me. You have said this is complicity on the part of the Lagos State government. So my question is, to what end is that complicity? To what end? Number one. Number two, so what does this say about the legacy of the man MKO and the woman? Because yes, it started as, around MKO and his ambition at the time, but there are many persons around him who paid the supreme price. One of them is the Kudirat Abiola, who was by any means and standard a woman, that will always be referred to by history. So what has this done, Because we might talk about Abiola. Under Buhari, he was given a posthumous award. He was given a GCFR posthumously, and it was declared, I think the Tinubu government has declared him a president, something like that, to say he wanted his office. Even posthumously, you can refer to him in that regard. But what about the legacy of the woman, Kudirat Abiola? But start with the first question. To what end are you adducing this complicity? Because when you look at a case that started in 2014, they approached the court, give us time, give us all of this. And they were 2017, they went back 3 years to say, oh, give us some time. The court gave them 30 days. 9 years after, nothing was done, in which you have called complicity. To what end? Let's start with that. To what end?
Well, I think it will be unimaginable that Lagos State would indulge in this kind of criminal atrocity of being complicitous in a case like that. But we have now seen that as a fact of history. Why they did that, only they could give you a valid explanation. We are only allowed in the court of conjecturing and guess what? To look in the dark for possible motive. I think one of the reasons could be political realignment. You see, Babangida is Tinubu's best friend now. Close your eyes and remember 1993 and juxtapose that with 2023. So a lot of things have happened. And look, the prosecution itself, as at the time of the case, look at the kinds of evidence they had. Sergeant Rogers was a state witness, and he submitted so much to the court and to public opinion. Because my newspaper at that time, I was head of the Tribune, of the Nigerian Sunday Tribune, had very copious coverage of the Oputa panel. I want to assure you that there was most likely enough evidence, from my little knowledge of law, to hold somebody responsible for the Kudirat Abiola murder and so many other murders traceable to the Abacha killer squad. I was almost a victim too. I was just lucky. It's in May 1997. I was just fortunate. So when you look at all of these things and add all of them together, we are just pawns on the chessboard of politics. Buhari was president, and you ask me whether Buhari was an Abacha man or not. He was. All the Abacha criminals who looted the nation to the bone, they are in power today. They are in power today. Just as you have people who are suspected of funding terrorism and who still remain in the driving seat of power today. So you need to unlock your thought process to look at the connectivity all around. I think that was a decision of political alignment, and the nation is the worst for it. If Mustapha was innocent, then who killed Kudirat Abiola? They said it was Sergeant Rogers. They had a deal with Sergeant Rogers to come and bear witness against his former boss. I think I was the only newspaper that saw that these guys were trained in North Korea. Professor Inka said they were trained in Iraq. I said no, they were trained in North Korea, and I was right. But that is immaterial now. The point is, when people are killed in broad daylight like that, and they are politically exposed persons, and nothing really happens, nobody.
Pastor Ogunwusi, are you with us, sir? All right. We'll try and reconnect. Many questions. Can you hear us, sir? All right. Many questions are being raised here, especially. So, if by inference, equation 1, if my science knowledge doesn't fail me, you get to equation 1, then you move to equation 2. The summation of equation 1 and equation 2 gives you equation 3, and it gives going all like that. Pastor Ogunwusi, are you with us, sir? All right. We'll try and reconnect properly now. So the question is, the first court of trial found Al-Mustapha guilty and was sentenced to death, right? And then he appealed. And of course, the appeal court, for want of evidence, discharged the man. The Lagos State said no, and they appealed further to the Supreme Court. And, 3 years later, they abandoned the case. 3 years later, they went to the court for more time, and the court gave them 30 days. That 30 days has gone to 9 years. That was terminated yesterday. And after 9 years now, the Supreme Court said, it's like, you people, you have lost interest in the matter. 9 years is enough for anybody to either come with new evidence, a new line of thought of prosecution. It was totally abandoned, and then it was dismissed by the Supreme Court. So the question is, in the eye of the law, the latest before yesterday was the appeal court that said the man is innocent, right? For want of evidence. So the Supreme Court has just made a position.
What do they call it? An evidence that convinces you beyond
reasonable doubt.
That was what,
as they will usually say.
Yes.
So the question this morning now, who killed Kudirat Abiola? The question is still lingering, because in the eye of the law, the High Court said he was guilty. The Appeal Court said, no, there is not enough evidence to convince this court that he killed the man, so you can as well say he was innocent. The Supreme Court on the matter didn't really make a position about the substance. It was that the case was abandoned. We have better things to do. Get it off our table. So the last before the Supreme Court was the discharging of the man, right? To say no of sufficient evidence, to convince, the court that he was really guilty. So in the eye of the law, you could as well say, Major Al-Mustapha is innocent in the eye of the law. So the question is, the woman died. Her driver died. Who killed them? Even in 2025, since 1990, I think 98 or thereabout. So that's 96. Thank you. Till now, we are still asking the question. Although the Nigerian state in 2025, May 2025, Alhaja Kudirat Abiola was posthumously honored by the Nigerian state. I remember on June 12, 2025, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu conferred the national honor on her as part of Democracy Day celebrations. When they were reading out the heroes of democracy. Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, CFR, posthumously, obviously. And the reason was because she was recognized as a heroine of the June 12, 1993 struggle, with the award acknowledging her contribution to Nigeria's democracy, for which she was assassinated in 1996. The award was announced during President Tinubu's Democracy Day address to the joint session of the National Assembly on June 12, 2025. And what could have been, you know, maybe if the Supreme Court really ruled on the substance of the matter yesterday to serve as a closure. Now, obviously, no closure.
No closure. I mean, you can confer on anyone as many titles or as many honors as you may. But when there is a disregard or when you're unable to deliver justice, I don't think that all of those honors matter. Well, I would say that if the highest authority in the land, if the presidency could not make a statement about this, then something is wrong. And the family as well, they didn't say anything.
Well, when she was conferred, that's when
I'm not talking about the conferment.
No, I just want to put it there that the family represented by Hamza Al-Abiola expressed gratitude for the official recognition. Additionally, in Lagos, a major role was renamed Kudirat Abiola with our honor. Just to say, maybe, you know what they say, we said it yesterday, at all. If anything is mentioned, but not about really justice. The honor given posthumously does not replace justice. It does not replace justice.
Doesn't. And the way we parade ourselves and the way and manner we enable these things in Nigeria is alarming. I mean, if something like this happened in your family and you cannot speak to it and say, oh, we do appreciate, I was expecting that, you know, when all of these honors were conferred from the Buhari time for the husband and now the Tinubu administration conferring on her, you know, this honor. I'm talking about the fact that the family ought to have stood for something and saying that, yes, we do appreciate this and it is well deserved. Let them know that, yes, it is well deserved, this honors. But then it does not replace justice. And we are still expecting the justice. Whether it will come in 100 years, it will come in whatever, we need that justice. And I think that the Nigerian state too, what does I was going to go into.
So hopefully we have the balance.
The aftermath of this updates now, of this recent development. What is the aftermath? What is the aftermath on Lagosians that you could go on the street, no matter who you are? I mean, those were very high-profile people. No matter who you are.
That's right.
Can you go on so you can be on the streets of Lagos, you can be gunned down, and you will have a prolonged case, and at the end of the day, somebody somewhere will develop cold feet, and you're denied justice. Two, the family as well. She would have a relative somewhere who may think that she doesn't really have the voice and would not be amplified enough to bring the Lagos state government to jolt them back to realization, the reality of things, that we need closure for this family. Yes, I'm saying that somebody somewhere, she would have relatives, even if she doesn't have children, which is not to say she doesn't.
I've seen one of the Abiola'S, one of the son, I think Kudirat's son, I forgot the name of the guy now. It was on a particular podcast with Sheikh Okinbaloye. And I think 2025, who spoke on the matter, spoke on other matter and spoke about the justice for her mom. You know, and just like we have just established here, the honors can never replace the justice here. So many persons might have been speaking up, just like you said, maybe they don't have that kind of big voice on this matter. But then some things we will expect on this matter, we expect the Lagos state government to respond to this matter. They should be called out. In fact, we are calling the Lagos state government out right now under the leadership of His Excellency, Olushola Babajide Sanwo-Olu, to address this matter. It might not have happened. Obviously, it didn't happen under him, actually. But then the government, as they say, is a continuum. This verdict has been given by the Supreme Court yesterday. What is the position of the Lagos state on this matter? Number one, people will be expecting the Abiola'S to come with a statement on this matter.
Isn't it a bit too late? Remember, it was closed and reopened.
No, I mean these latest developments.
Yeah, now it has been dismissed. It has been dismissed. Can it be reopened?
Well,
those are questions
we need to ask. If family will still speak, how there are matters, we hope we're able to reconnect with Pastor Ogunwusi. But right now, we go on a break. When we return, hopefully the conversation will continue. And let us know, perhaps you were active in 1993 when all of these things started. In 1994, 95, 96, when the woman died, 98 was when Abiola died. Interestingly, Abacha died in 98. Abiola died in 98 as well. Abacha died before Abiola. Yeah, remember it was at the World Cup when I think Abacha died. Yeah, it was a France 98 World Cup, I remember. So the guys were donning the black handband at the time. And, what happened, because that's another case on his own. Oh, who killed Abiola? It was a tea. Oh, he didn't drink tea. It was a heart attack. It was seizure. Okay, there was a visit by Condoleezza Rice. I think the American Secretary of State at the time. And all of those conjectures. I think the last of the Mohicans, right now, figuratively speaking, will have been the case of Kudirat Abiola, which was dismissed yesterday for lack of due diligence. 11 years in total from Lagos State government. And maybe that's why our guest was talking about complicity on this matter. But then that will be broadened further. That will be after now. What I was trying to say is this: tell us your thoughts on this matter, what you feel, on our social media handles. We like, if you can do that now, to have your comment on this matter. But then we have a break. We'll continue after now.